Hello and welcome to our tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to look at animating an object along a path, and the object we're going to use is our camera. So let's have a quick look at our scene here. So we've got kind of a large kind of landscape area. We have a kind of a mountainous or kind of cliff sort of area in the distance, and then this little orange dot here where the mouse is, this is our camera. So if we press 0 on the numpad, we can look through. If we just have a very quick look at the camera settings, it's a big wide angle lens, 13mm. So we want this to kind of animate forward. So let's do that. So first of all, I'm going to go cursor to selected, and then I'm going to add a new object, and it's going to be a path. So it's a curved object, a vector. I'm going to take this line here, I'm going to rotate it. So it's kind of pointing in the direction we want the camera to move. Press G and move it forward a bit. And I'm going to go into edit mode, and you can see that it has, first of all, arrows pointing in a direction, so it gives us an idea of what direction it's moving in, and we can move these individual vertices, and you can see that this black line is the path that we will travel by. And the distance between these is actually quite important because it can determine acceleration and speed between each point. We can get in and control all that with a function in or a view in Blender here called the graph editor, but we'll explore that another day. So for now we're just going to keep it nice and simple. So we're going to have the camera follow along the path. So what I want to do is I'm just going to apply the scale of this path. So press Control A there. So I'm going to apply scale and rotation. So our scale is set to 0 and our rotation set to 0. Okay. So that's our object. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select the camera. And on the camera, we're going to add a constraint, which is going to control its behavior. And the constraint we're going to use here is called follow path. Now, it's the follow path is going to follow this nerve path here, which is our object. So let's just rename that cam path. There we go. So I select my camera, and then I want to change that to cam path. Now, the camera has jumped away, so we need to reposition that. So that's quite simple. Our 3D cursor is where we want it to be, so we'll go Shift S, selection to cursor, and our camera is back where we want it to be, looking over the landscape. Now we've a couple of little things to set up here, so it's going to I hit back there, so we go back to frame number 1. Our animation is 500 frames long, which is quite a long animation. So what we want to do is make sure that the animation on the path is the same length. So I'm going to select my path here and go to its properties. It has a panel here saying path animation, and it says frames 100. So this is 500 and 100. So we want this to be 500 frames long. Okay, and we're going to go back now to the camera. And we're going to have a look at this constraint here. We're going to say Animate Path. So that means that we're going to follow this path. And now we're just going to press play and see what happens. So the movement relative to the scale of the scene is quite small. But you can see as we move forward here, you can see this black line move a slight amount or small amount. And this camera is actually moving forward. So let's pause that and go back to the start. You can see we've jumped back a little bit. And what we'll do is we will, in the top view, we're going to go back and select our path here. And we'll go into edit mode. And let's see if we can make this animation a little bit more dramatic. So we'll move this forward. And this one. That one, and that one. Now, of course, we can move it all the way through 3D space. It can go up and down, left and right, so we're just trying to keep it simple for now. So we'll go back to object mode, and we'll look through our camera, and just so we get a higher frame rate, we'll go into wireframe mode and we'll press play. So we should see the camera cover a lot more space because we've made the path cover a lot more space. Now there's all sorts of other settings that we can go in and play with. We can tell the camera to follow the orientation of the path by saying follow curve, so it'll kind of change the rotation of the camera to follow this. We can change the orientation of the camera along here so that it's pointing in a different axis. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can do, but realistically, so I think I'm going to get, I'm probably missing a texture here, but if I got a rendered here, so we can see, yeah, I'm missing a texture. This is our scene. So if we look at that frame 24, now if we go back here to our 3D animation, let's just go back to modeling here. We go to our last frame. You can see that the camera position has changed significantly. So I'm not going to dwell on it much more than that. So it's a relatively straightforward thing to do. It can be very useful for, you know, if you were making like a train follow a set of tracks or something. So if you have a very specific path you want something to follow, you can see that this would be quite a handy tool to get one object to follow another, for example, or you know, if you wanted to do a fly through, for example, or of a game level, if you're playing, say, if you think of an example of a golf game where you might have the camera fly over the particular hole that you were about to play, this sort of technique is quite handy. So one of the requirements you have in your project is to show that you understand path animation. So you can use it in this project or in the next one, but it has to be in one of them. Now you don't have to get your camera to follow the object. You can animate any object. You can have a light follow this object, so you can have an animated light in your scene, or you can use this in any creative way that you think is appropriate. Okay, so we'll leave it there for now.